Hello everybody, welcome back. It's been kind of a while since we've had a sociology video posted on here, but figured it was about time to add to our little library here. So the topic of our focus today is going to be on socialization. Basically, we're going to talk about this idea of how we become human, because believe it or not, we weren't born human, and we're going to look at that topic today. So our essential questions, two big topics to think about as we go through today. What do sociologists mean when they say socialization makes us human? Okay, we'll talk about that. And then lastly, how do agents of socialization work together or compete to make us who we are? There are some people that think they all work together. There are some people who think they compete. So we'll give you a chance to think about that as well. We're also going to talk about what agents of socialization are as we go throughout this unit. So please think about these questions as we go along. So first of all, it's important when we talk about this idea of socialization to determine a definition. When we talk about socialization in sociology, we're talking about the cultural process of learning to participate in group life. So basically, you're learning how to be part of a group. Small groups, large group, the human group. Okay, so it's a cultural process. You're learning how to be human. The big thing to understand is that it lasts from the time you're born to the time you die. You're constantly being socialized, re-socialized, desocialized, because the world's changing all the time. So socialization is a lifelong process. It teaches us our attitudes, our beliefs, our values, and our behaviors. In other words, socialization gives us our quote-unquote personality. And we're actually going to be doing some stuff with personality as we go through this unit. Two very famous studies have been done to talk about the importance of socialization. Actually, three. One of them that we're actually going to watch in class is called the Harry Harlow Monkey Study, which was done in the 1950s. And as you can see in that picture there on the right, what Harlow did was take these monkeys, and some of them had been raised on wire mothers, others had been raised on cloth mothers. The wire mothers had a bottle attached, the cloth mothers did not, they were just soft. And what he tried to do was see how the monkeys would respond to each of these mothers if they were put into a situation where there was some fear going on. And what he found, and again we're going to watch the video, is that closeness and comfort were more important than food. In other words, we have a need for intimacy, warmth, contact, and comfort. If we don't have that, we're not going to develop properly. And there's deprivation of those things. We get distress, we get apathy, and we get withdrawal. The other major case is the one done by Lawrence Kastler in 1965. And he did a lot of studies on institutionalized children, or children that were living in orphanages or group homes or something like that. And what he discovered is that if you provide kids or children with 20 minutes of extra touch every day, you can improve their developmental growth. They're going to develop better than kids who do not receive that 20 minutes of extra touch a day. So as we're going to see, socialization is really important. There are two key terms here to understand when we talk about socialization. And it's actually a debate that we're going to talk about as we go through the socialization unit. And it's this idea of nature versus nurture. Are we born a certain way? Are we made a certain way? Or is it a combination of both? It's important to understand the definition of the two. Nature is biological. It's hereditary. They're innate factors that we're just born with. We can't control. Nurture, on the other hand, are societal and environmental factors. So you can probably imagine it. Being a sociology class, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at this nurture idea. But it's also really important to understand that there's an interaction between both of these that make us who we are. And you see the pictures there on the bottom of the screen. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the idea of twins. And there's been some really interesting case studies done on twins to see which is more important, nature or nurture. Okay, if you remember a couple weeks ago at the very beginning of our semester, we started talking about this idea of perspective, that there are three major ways that sociologists can look at a given topic. And in this case, we're going to see how each of these perspectives looks at socialization. A functionalist perspective. Remember that functionalists talk about how things work together. Functionalists stress how these groups work together to create a stable society. And they basically say something like, the agents of socialization, for example, schools and families, work together to socialize kids. All of these things work together to make kids who we want them to be. On the other side, we have the conflict perspective. Remember that conflict theorists think that there's constant conflict everywhere in the world. And they said that there's inequalities and power struggles and that socialization actually perpetuates the status quo. What that means is that all of these different agents of socialization are working against each other to make kids who they are. And what they say is that oftentimes when a kid is born, they accept that social class and that status they're born with before they even understand what that means. They don't realize that they have a choice. We say that they're born in a certain social class and they accept it right away. And that's what a conflict theorist would look at. And so they argue that because kids accept their place right when they're born, there's no upset in the social class structure. Okay, so we see the difference there between how functionalists and conflict theorists look at socialization. The really important part here of socialization is this idea of the self. And I'm sure people have asked you to describe yourself or say who you think you are. And that's actually a really complex idea, this idea of the self. And actually, symbolic interactionists are the one that look at this idea. They say there's this symbol that we all agree on called the self. I have a self, you have a self, your parents have a self, teachers, whatever. And basically what that means is that we have an image that's separate from other people. We believe that we're somehow different than others. I'm Jim Plaza, you are who you are. That is the idea of the self. But the self, they argue, is created by other people, by socialization. And oftentimes that's done through role-taking, or assuming the viewpoint of another and using that to shape our self-concept. This is a very key concept that we need to understand here. And it's called the looking glass self. If you take a look at these two pictures here, you can probably get an idea that the looking glass self, think of it as a mirror. A looking glass is a fancy way of saying a mirror. We have an image of ourself based on what we think others think of us. Now that sounds kind of confusing at first, but if you think about it, we're basically using other people as mirrors to reflect what they think of us. Okay, oftentimes that image is distorted. So if I see someone give me a weird look, I have this distorted image of what they think of me. If they frown at me, for example, I might think I'm smell bad or I'm ugly or something like that because of that reaction. If they smile at me or give me a little wink, across the room, that typically would mean that I would feel pretty good about myself. But we use those other people's reactions to us and our behaviors to see who we really are, and that's called the looking glass self. And here's how it works. Number one, we imagine how we appear to that person. We imagine the reactions of those others to our appearance, and then we evaluate ourselves according to how we imagine those people have judged us. So here's an example. Let's say, for example, I want to impress a classmate. I want to show them how smart I am. Okay, I study really hard. I read another section of the textbook just to make sure I have a lot of information. I watch some documentaries or something on TV. So I prepare really, really well because I want to impress this classmate. So I participate in the class discussion the next day, and I have an image of how I performed. I rocked it. I brought up all these great points. This person's going to be so impressed with me. Check it out. But when I look at that person, maybe they're sleeping, or maybe they're on their phone texting, or maybe they're just staring off into space. And so I think, based on that reaction, that my classmate is disappointed, that he or she is not satisfied with what I've done. And so therefore, I feel bad about myself because I didn't get them to feel the way that I wanted to. I used that person's reaction as a mirror to see who I really am. And that's what we call the looking glass self. So we're going to look at some other examples of this as we go through the unit. There are several parts of socialization, several things that make us who we are. And we're going to go into more detail about these as we go through the unit, so I'm not really going to spend a whole bunch of time here. But if you look at this little wheel here, we have us, let's say you, the individual in the middle, and then all of the things around that are the things that make you who you are. Okay, so your family, the school you go to, the church you go to, the community you grow up in, etc. All of those things play a role in shaping who you become. And those are called agents of socialization. And again, we're going to look more into detail as we go through the unit. Lastly, some very important terms as far as how socialization works. Again, second time we've said this, so you can probably guess it's pretty important. Socialization is a lifelong process, and change constantly occurs. Think about old people with technology. they have to learn constantly to adapt to new technology that comes out, phones and televisions and video games and music and whatever it might be. So they constantly have to learn. The way that works is that we have to be desocialized from the way we used to do things. We give up our old norms, our old values, our old attitudes and behaviors. And we are resocialized then by adopting new norms, new values, new attitudes, new behaviors. Okay? Oftentimes, we are resocialized through rewards or punishments, also known as sanctions, which hopefully by now you're familiar with. So here's an example, and you can see there on the right. The U.S. Marines, or a first year at a military academy, you are completely desocialized. They take away who you were before. They cut your hair in a lot of cases. They take away your civilian clothes, and they give you standard issue items, and you become a serial number, basically. So you're desocialized, and then through rewards and punishments in the military, you are resocialized into being a Marine, or into being a sailor, or into being a soldier. Whatever you might be doing, you're resocialized into that. Sometimes we voluntarily resocialize, and this is called anticipatory socialization. We prepare ourselves to accept new norms, new values, attitudes, and beliefs. Oftentimes this happens when you take a next step into school. Like, for example, when you go to elementary school to middle school, or you go from middle school to high school, or high school to college, or college to the workforce. You learn to get rid of some of the things that you did before so that you can get ready to be a part of that new group you're going to join. So like if I'm in high school, I have to give up some things I did in high school so that I can get ready for what life is going to be like in college. And we call that anticipatory socialization. Okay, oftentimes, again, like I said, preteens, teenage years, college seniors, all that kind of stuff. Okay, the results of socialization. What is the end goal? And this is what sociologists often debate. Is it internalization or interaction? Some sociologists argue that the result of socialization is that an individual completely accepts society's norms and beliefs and becomes part of that group. They make those norms who they are. And they call that internalization. You make that part of who you are. There are some people, though, that say, that's not really the case. It's more about learning to interact. We know the societal definitions of things, but we also have our own definitions that we have to negotiate with other people. So it's something to think about as we go through this unit. Do you think that socialization results in internalization or interaction? Okay, and again, it's a pretty large debate in sociology, so it's something that we'll definitely go over throughout the unit. All right, so this wraps up our video for today. If you need to watch again, please feel free to rewind. Also, make sure that you've answered all of the questions as we go through this. Those questions are going to be the basis of your grade. It's going to let me know that you actually watched the video, so make sure you go back and do that. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys learned something, and I will see you next time.